Welcome to this edition of Talking Outdoors. I'm Ramir Samni and I'm a team leader with Life Happens Outdoors. Today we're going to be talking about Kilimanjaro. It's probably one of the most immersive experiences on the planet. This is one of our most popular trips, and it's actually the first ever experience that Life Happens Outdoors offered when we first got started. So I'm super thrilled to just jump into all the questions and have them all answered for you. Okay, great question, because I think everybody, when we come to a trip like this, the thinking is, am I ready? Am I fit enough? Is this an adventure for me? So I think taking it from this angle, the first ingredient is that you absolutely must want it. Okay, so we've had people on the summit of Kilimanjaro with a beer belly from their chin to the floor, and we've had people and they actually made it to the top, and then we've had people who work in the fitness industry and weren't able to make it. So the core ingredient that we find is the most important is to actually want to do it. If you want to do it, then you're going to understand why you're putting yourself through it, why you're going for something that's that can be quite challenging at times. And sometimes it's not just necessarily about the physical ability, but it's the mental will to go through some of the challenges that we face on this experience. In terms of where you should be in your fitness level, it's important to consider this as one of the enduring trips. So we recommend that you are doing some kind of physical fitness exertion, if you like, or class, or whatever it is that works for you, around 3 to 4 times a week in the lead up to this experience. So this is something that, if it's running, if it's swimming, if it's cycling, whatever works for you, but some sort of physical activity. Of course, if you have access to hiking trails, by all means do that, but some kind of physical activity, at least for 1 hour, 3 to 4 times a week would be kind of where you want to sit on this experience. In terms of specific training, we recommend doing things like definitely yoga and Pilates. These are no-brainers. Anything where you're holding your bodies all working together as one unit. I think that really helps a lot with physical conditioning and learning how to breathe while you're exerting yourself. That's super important. So I would say vinyasa style yoga would be something really interesting to explore. Pilates definitely, and then cardio. Cardio is super important. So to be able to operate with a slightly elevated heart rate, to be able to push for long periods of time, to get your leg muscles particularly and your core used to long periods of exertion. Because on Kilimanjaro, we spend a lot of time on the trail. So typically a walking day, with the exception of summit night, a walking day is typically around between 6 to 8 hours. So your body needs to be able to operate over that period. Of course, it's not walking at pace. It's walking in a nice, slow, steady pace that we set, especially because we're in the high altitude environment. But your body should be used to it. What you don't want to do is be sore, because your muscles are feeling things for the first time on the first day of the trip. So definitely go for cardio, Pilates, yoga. I would also say, it's always good, whatever works for you. If you go to the gym and you do, you're into weights or whatever works for you. You're into swimming. You're just anything that is moving your body is important. And of course, if you have access to places where you can do long walks in an elevated environment, so where you can go uphill, downhill, those are really important. But don't, with Kili, I would stay away from going too crazy. Like sometimes you see people putting 10 kilos in a backpack and walking up the treadmill for 1 hour at level 11 or 12 and basically throwing out their back before they get anywhere near Kilimanjaro. I wouldn't recommend that. What I would say is focus on the things that are accessible to you, that you would enjoy, that are sustainable, and think of this as a journey that may go beyond Kilimanjaro. So look for things that really work for you. So core ingredients, just to recap. First thing, you need to want it. That's the most important thing. And then when you do want it, think about your mindset should be, how can I make this experience as enjoyable as possible? And the answer to that for most of us is to increase our physical fitness slightly in order to make the experience more manageable for us to be able to enjoy it. And so that's Pilates, Vinyasa style yoga, any kind of cardiovascular exercise, whether it's swimming, spinning, dancing, whatever works for you, whatever is available to you. And if you have access to some outdoor space, then definitely long walks really helps. In an ideal world, the more lead time you have, so the more time you have ahead of the expedition, the better it is. So I would say as soon as you sign up, or as soon as to your mind you feel like this is something that you could really sign up to, start thinking about what kind of changes you need to make in your daily life in order to bring yourself, your fitness level up to where it needs to be by the time you come to Kilimanjaro. So I wouldn't say, oh, you got to be training a year in advance. For some people, that means 2 months ahead, 1 month ahead. Maybe you already train and it's just about upping your training or shifting it away from maybe, say, doing, a physical session that's predominantly bicep curls to moving towards something that's a little bit more holistic. It might be that might be what it is. So what I would say is wherever you do sign up from, like whatever lead time you have, start from that moment and don't think, oh, I've got, a year or 6 months or whatever. Just think of this as, Kilimanjaro is the end point of a fitness journey that starts at the moment you decide to make it happen. Yeah, absolutely. So a typical day on Kilimanjaro starts, so assuming that we're starting already on the trail, because there's obviously the day that we start where we're still at the hotel and we head to the trail. But a typical day on the trail will start at around 6 o'clock in the morning when we get woken up. And then we would pack up our tents, have our breakfast, pack up the things that are in our, in our duffel bags. And then we would head out from the camp, usually around 8 o'clock in the morning. That's typically what we aim for. Sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes it's a little later, depending on the day, but more or less 8 would be the average. We would walk usually, with breaks of course, up until around 12 or 1 o'clock. Depending on the day, we might have a hot lunch at our destination. So in some cases, our day actually finishes before lunch. We actually arrive to our final destination of the day in order to have a hot lunch there. On other days, we would have lunch on the trail. Sometimes it's a packed lunch. Sometimes we're able to set up a mess tent and be able to have a hot lunch on the trail as well. Typically, we would end the day anywhere between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. So that depends. If we arrive in time for lunch, it would normally end around 2 p.m. If it's a full day, we would tend to end around 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. But this is with many breaks plus lunch, which would normally be a full hour, if not a little bit more than that. Once we arrive to the camp, we would set up our tents again. So the physical tents themselves get set up by the team. But when I say set up the tent, what I mean is unpack the duffel bag, put out your sleeping bags, do things like that. And then we'll have time to take some pictures. There's always tea and coffee in the mess tent. So there's always a place to hang out if you don't want to chill in your own tent or you don't want to go for a walk around and see the views. And then we have dinner normally around 6 p.m. And then people will start to make their way to their tents around 8:39. And that's when we would, everybody would do their own thing until they fall asleep, and then we would start again. Of course, this is different when we're starting from the hotel. That's on our very first day of the trail. That day is a half day, so we get to the gate of Kilimanjaro at around 12 p.m. So that's midday, and then we walk to around 6 p.m. So it's about a half a day. And then, of course, summit night is a different story altogether. That's a much longer experience because we have to go all the way up to the summit, and then we have to come all the way back down to a much lower altitude from where we started. So that's a longer experience, but that too is broken up into different segments as well. So Kilimanjaro has huge variation in temperature. Even when we don't have any weather or no clouds, the temperature fluctuation between day and night is quite substantial. So on our very first night, which is Machami Camp, usually if you're coming up the Machami route, it's other elevations, but typically it's around 3,000 meters, depending on which route you're doing. That would be where we sleep on our very first night. So whether you're coming up the Machami route and you're at Machami Camp, or whether you're coming up from Marangu route and you're in Mandara, we're around 3,000 meters. During the day, 3,000 meters, you could have around 25, we could reach 25 degrees Celsius, maybe 22, 25 when you come out of the rainforest and you get the direct sunlight. At night, it can dip to single digits, 5, 6 degrees. So that's a 20 degree Celsius difference between day and night. And that's when you don't have any weather. When you do have weather, the difference can be even more substantial. On summit night, the temperature can dip as low as -10, and it can also hit as high as 10 above. If we get sunlight and we're on the summit and there's no wind, it can be quite warm quite quickly. So temperature fluctuations on Kilimanjaro are substantial. And then in terms of weather, there have been days, I would say more days than like this than not, of days where we experience all the weather in one day. So we would have hot and dry, and then rain, and then wind, and then no wind, and then a little bit of hail, and maybe even some snow. So it really does fluctuate dramatically. And so in order to prepare for this, stick to the gear list. Everything that you need to contend with the weather, whether it's extremely hot or extremely cold, is found in the gear list. So if you have everything in the gear list, you're going to be perfectly fine. It'll help you when it rains, it'll help you when there's wind, it'll help you when it's cold, it'll help you when it's hot. Everything that you need is in the gear list, so stick to it and it'll be fine. It's very rarely been the case that you get bad weather throughout the entire experience. It has happened before, but it's not typical. At the end of the day, we're in the mountains, and Kilimanjaro itself has a microclimate. So regardless of what the weather forecast is, you have a climate on Kilimanjaro that operates independently of the rest of the mountain. And that's because of the rainforest at the base and the different biomes, the different environments that you have on the mountain that then keep the weather fluctuating around the mountain. So we can almost say with certainty, regardless of what all the weather apps say, that at around midday, 12 o'clock, 12:30, we will start to hear some thunder. And that would be because the condensation clouds, the humidity clouds that are forming at the base of the rainforest are now starting to become quite saturated, and they are starting to pour in the rainforest itself. So even if where we are, no wind, absolutely nothing is happening, it's a wonderful day, we're tanning, we can sometimes hear a thunderstorm at the base of the mountain, and we can't even see it. So that's the charm of Kilimanjaro. You get to experience all of this, and it's really quite beautiful. Frostbite is something that takes a long time to form. It's not something that just happens. On Kilimanjaro, we do experience temperatures that can be concerning, especially if we don't have the right equipment. But we are generally not exposed long enough to be able to experience any serious forms of frostbite. Sometimes we'll get some cold fingers, they're not responsive, or cold toes. That's quite typical. But the moment the sun comes up and once the ground warms up, we all warm up as well. So the threat of frostbite is practically not existent on this mountain, even though we do get pretty cold. I think snacks are one of the most controversial issues on Kilimanjaro. And I think it's largely because people are not used to, like you said, people are generally, they choose Kilimanjaro as a first experience. So they're not necessarily used to how it goes. And one of the big kind of, if you like, cultural tensions that we face is this idea of carrying snacks for everybody. And so you normally find that like you've got the waterproof stuff that's taking up around half a kilo, and you've got the little first aid kit taking up half a kilo, and a couple of warm layers, and then your water and everything. So altogether you've got around 4 kilos on your back, and then you have 5 additional kilos of dates and protein bars and snacks to basically feed the entire army. Which is not what you need to do on Kilimanjaro. So on Kilimanjaro, as a starting point, it's very important to pace your snacks. Your team leader is going to explain this to you during the first briefing, and then re-explain it to you when you don't listen, because you won't. I know that I didn't. But you basically you want to have on the first day you want to experiment and see what how many snacks you actually consume during that day. And then after that, you'll start to tweak. So if you felt like you didn't carry enough snacks, you can carry a little bit more the following day. If you felt like you carried too many, then you tweak and function. But basically, you want enough for yourself. That's really important. And for everybody to carry enough for themselves. If you want to give snacks to other people, then you can do that at the camps and have them carry it. But don't carry it for them, because your back is going to give out, and then you're not going to be there to feed them on the summit. So you want to make sure that you actually do get to go and have this experience in an enjoyable way. In terms of what to bring, snacks are also, not all snacks are created equally. And I would say that it's really important for you as a starting point to bring things that you actually enjoy and that your stomach is used to. So this is not the right time. If you've never tried, gels and high protein bars and all of this, the stuff that like you don't maybe normally take off the store shelves, this is not the place to experiment with those. All right, regardless of what different people may tell you and different sports experts and whatever, at 4,000, 5,000 and almost 6,000 meters, this is not the place to introduce something new to your stomach and be like, hey, digest this. What's going to happen is that your stomach, you're going to have an upset stomach. You're not going to enjoy your snacks, and it's just going to have an all-around negative effect. It may not happen, but it has happened often enough for us to think that it's relevant to put this information out there. So go with snacks that you're going to enjoy. If a chocolate bar that you love since your childhood is your thing, go with that. What we care about more than anything else is calories. And we like high sugary stuff on Kilimanjaro because you're in environments where you're sweating, or you potentially could be sweating a lot. Your body is losing, nutrients and minerals from, going to the toilet and maybe not necessarily having access to what you normally have and what your body is used to. And sugar is a really good tool for when you're facing difficult moments, because it does give that energy boost to people, especially on Kilimanjaro and especially on summit night. So I personally go with, the sugary gelatin snacks that like Haribo or, and actually the more sugary and the more zingy it is, the more I enjoy it. And I wouldn't normally eat it down here, but up there it's all I want, and it gives me the boost that I need. You don't necessarily know yet, perhaps, because if this might be your first experience, what it is that works for you. But I would say a good place to start is go for the snacks that you actually enjoy. If you don't enjoy, the 100% dark chocolate vegan thing that, is like the new trending, I don't know what, made of quinoa, then maybe don't have that. Bring the thing that you enjoy, and nobody's going to judge you on the mountain, that's for sure. In terms of if you like going for chocolate or going for something not chocolate or whatever, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is that it's something that you enjoy, that you can consume, that's high in calories, and that'll give you that energy boost when it's needed. It's also possible to get snacks in Tanzania, but we recommend bringing snacks from home because you won't necessarily find what you're looking for if there's something particular that you're after. We provide your lunches and all your meals. We also have some snacks like biscuits and juices and things like that, and fruits available for you. But for the things like, like I said, the Haribo or the Snickers bars or the whatever it is that works for you that you really want, or maybe very well might be the, quinoa vegan 100% dark chocolate thing, then make sure that you have that with you, because it's highly unlikely that you're going to find it. And even if it is available, it might not be easy for us to source it because of the amount of time we have in Moshi. Great. So I'm going to answer the drinking water question first. So drinking water comes from, at first it's bottled water that we get on the very first day. That's what you are going to fill up your bottles with on our way up to the first camps. Once we're on the mountain, the water is sourced from local streams. It's then treated both with treatment pills and boiling. And then it's served to you for drinking. There is a difference between water that we use for washing and water that we use for drinking. The washing buckets are you're not supposed to drink those because they wouldn't have gone through the treatment process. The water that is for drinking it'll be very clearly marked for you. We fill up your water bottles directly, so you won't be filling anything up yourself. And we use that for just general drinking water, or for the tea and the coffee and all of that. All of that is treated, and everything that we use for cooking as well is treated. So that's how that works. In terms of the food. So food on Kilimanjaro is varied. We're definitely always going to have fresh fruits and vegetables throughout the entire trip. And that includes things like avocado, because we're in the land of avocado. So we'll have a lot of access to fresh mangoes, pineapples, and things like that. We'll also have, so the meals themselves will be quite varied. There will always be a carb, which is very important on the mountain. So there's always going to be rice or pasta or potatoes. Those are usually our core carbs, and they can come in various forms. Sometimes it's on a side of like a stew. Sometimes it's part of the main meal. Like if it's a spaghetti, then obviously it's spaghetti with its sauce. There's always going to be a protein. The protein can be chicken, meat, or fish, and the chicken, meat, or beans as well for people who don't eat, who are vegetarian or vegan. And we don't we source our meat daily. So every day we have runners coming up from different parts of the mountain, from villages at the bottom, who bring fresh meat. So we don't keep the meat overnight, whether it's fish, chicken, or seafood. Did I say seafood already? So fish, chicken, or meat. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And then of course we always have soup as well. So every meal starts with a soup. Then there's a main course, which is usually a rice dish or a pasta dish with some protein, and then there will be dessert, which is usually fruits. And then for breakfast, we have porridge, we have pancakes, there's sausages and eggs. It's a whole thing. So food is basically it's kind of like international, if you like. So it's very basic stuff. Of course, we also serve some local things, but if you're not used to them or you don't want to try them, you don't have to. But we always have a serving of ugali, which is a local dish that the porters say gives them strength. I'm personally a very big fan of them, and I can attest to the fact that they do give strength, because I've been in some very challenging situations on Kilimanjaro, and I've found my energy in ugali. So there's definitely some opportunities to try out local dishes. But again, like with the snacks, I would say don't go for something that your stomach is not used to. So if you've already been in East Africa, you've had some of these flavors before, then go for it. If you want to try them out when we either get back or on the first night, when we have very easy access to evacuate anything that needs evacuation. Yeah, there you have it. Right. So I know that for a lot of people, hygiene is a big question, especially because they're doing this for the very first time and they're not used to how it might run. So I'll start with the toilet, because I think everybody's most concerned about that. On Kilimanjaro, there are two kinds of toilets that we have available. There are the fixed toilets that are spread out across the trail and at the camps. They're supplied by the national park. They're generally quite well kept for where their location is. Some better than others. In the camps, they're better kept than they are on the trails. And they're usually like a squatty potty type of thing. So you squat, you don't touch anything. It's usually a big hole, and there's a deep septic tank, and it's you don't really touch much. So that's okay. And actually, I prefer to use those. We also have the private toilets that are part of our expedition. So we have a toilet tent with a physical toilet inside. You can go inside there and use it at the campsites. You won't have access to that while we're walking on the trail, but you will have access to that for the campsites themselves. That's in the mornings before we leave and in the evenings when we arrive. And those are regularly cleaned by our own staff, and nobody else has access to that except our own expedition. So yeah, and there'll be toilet paper in there and everything as well. So that's on the toilet side. On the being able to have access to a shower, showering is not possible on Kilimanjaro, but what we do provide are buckets of hot water. And you'll have buckets in the morning and buckets in the evenings. And apart from Imbarafu, which is the summit base camp, you can pretty much ask for more buckets of water as is needed. And we use them to just kind of, you can take them into your tent. There's like a little space between the outside and the inside where you're not actually inside the tent, but you're also shielded from everybody else. So you can have take off your clothes, have a proper shower if you like. I personally take my bucket out into the forest and do my thing. And you can know I'm there because you can hear me sing. So, but yeah, so and yes, you're not going to be able to have the full shower, but you can really feel clean. I wash my hair, I wash under my armpits, I wash my feet. Those are the most important things. And when I really get some distance from the camp, I can kind of go all out, but that's up to you. Most people are happy with just kind of washing their face, washing under their arms, their hair a little bit after maybe a couple of days. And that's it. But if you think about it, we're really only spending 6 nights on the mountain in total for most routes up Kilimanjaro. So it's basically 6 nights without a shower. And then afterwards, when you have that really nice shower in the hotel, it's like, it's amazing. You feel reborn. I think the comeback different is really like, it's really about the shower at the end of it all, I think. So, it's very, first, as a starting point, we cannot give you medical advice. You must speak to your doctor. You must get that information from your doctor. It's completely case specific. So we can't tell you what medications you can or can't take. What we can do is just explain to you a little bit about the situation in Tanzania and what the law requires. So the law requires that if you transit for any length of time, so you've exited the airport, or you live in sub-Saharan Africa, you must have a yellow fever vaccine. And that comes with a card, a yellow card that you have to present to the health authorities when you land. You must also, I believe, up until now, still be vaccinated for COVID-19, but the rules on that are changing rapidly, so it's really important to check the latest requirements before you travel. And we would also, it is also recommended, generally speaking, that malaria medication is taken because we are in a malaria zone when we are in Moshi on Kilimanjaro. Once we get to the first camp, so 3,000 meters and above, there are no more mosquitoes, so the risk is very minimal because malaria is transmitted from mosquito to human. So if there are no mosquitoes, then there's no chance of malaria. But we do spend some time in Moshi where there are mosquitoes, and it is possible to catch it over there, although it's very rare, but it's still very possible nonetheless. And it is recommended that you take malaria tablets with you and do take those tablets for any travel in sub-Saharan Africa. Which tablets and how it should work for you, this is between you and your doctor, and you need to speak to your GP about that. You may also need to speak to your GP about the latest recommendations on vis-a-vis malaria, because there is no the science, contrary to popular belief. There's no capital T, capital S. It's something that's always changing, and recommendations are always changing. So it's very important to stay up to date by speaking to your GP to find out what is the latest, change to the guidance on this. And finally, on the question of Diamox, because I think Diamox is the next question that comes with the medication. So Diamox, which is actually a apoacetazolamide, Diamox is a brand, generally speaking, it's touted as being this cure to altitude sickness. And although it does mask the symptoms and does actually deal with certain acute issues, like that it has been linked to a reduction in swelling in more advanced stages of altitude sickness, it is also a diuretic, and it also and our main concern on a mountain like Kilimanjaro is actually dehydration way before altitude sickness. Altitude sickness is really an issue for us on day 3 and beyond, and even by then we would have properly acclimatized. Our primary issue is dehydration, and most people will arrive to the mountain already exhibiting symptoms of dehydration, which is the number one reason why people turn around on Kilimanjaro. That's why we don't actually allow Diamox to be consumed without it being prescribed by the guides and team leaders. We have the medication needed for you for high altitude if it's necessary. It can be, it's a multitude of options that we have. So it's very, very, very important that you don't bring it with you. You don't consume it without anyone's knowledge, because it also removes the treatment option from us should we need to use it for anything that may arise. So Diamox in this instance, especially for Kilimanjaro specifically, is definitely something that you should not be consuming. Yeah, sure. So let's first understand what altitude is, and then we can understand what the thinking is and why we do things slightly differently in this regard. So once you go up to high altitude, what happens is there's less pressure in the atmosphere. And because there's less pressure in the atmosphere, that thing, which is pressure, that pushes all the gases together, starts to loosen up. So it isn't that there's less oxygen at high altitude. It's just that the pressure that holds it all together is less. So when I consume a full breath of air, my lungs feel full, feel satiated in the same way that they do down here at sea level. But I'm consuming less particles with every breath of air. So I'm consuming less oxygen. And so my body reacts to that by producing red blood cells. And the production of red blood cells and then the equilibrium that it brings is what we call acclimatization. So acclimatization it is getting used to altitude, but there's a physiological mechanism at play that makes us used to altitude. It's not a psychological use, like getting used to altitude hypothetically. There's something that's actually physiologically happening in our bodies. So the production of red blood cells, the process of that production is what we call acclimatization. And the way that our body produces red blood cells is it consumes calories, right? So it uses up energy. So as we're going up, it uses up energy in order for it to produce more red blood cells. And as the red blood cells are being produced, then our blood streams are becoming saturated with red blood cells. So what does this mean for us? It means two things. One, that we're consuming more calories at altitude at rest than we are down at sea level, which means that we need to consume enough calories, not just to have the energy to do the day on Kilimanjaro, but also we need to be consuming enough calories to compensate for the production of red blood cells that our body is undergoing in order to survive in this altitude. So eating is extremely important. Now, because our bloodstream is basically becoming more saturated with red blood cells, more so than it's used to, we need to dilute those red blood cells. So we need to consume more water, which we also need to consume because we're at high altitude and we're walking. And so we're generally in, like we described earlier, the environments are so varied. We could be in really hot temperatures, and our bodies are exerting themselves, and so we're losing our liquid through sweat, and we need to compensate for that drinking in addition to diluting our red blood cells. So eating is super important. Drinking water and staying hydrated is super important for altitude. And then of course, the faster we move, the higher our heart rate, the more our body feels like it's burning more calories, and so we're become more fatigued. So walking at a slow and steady pace is extremely important. And that's why pole pole is something you hear a lot on Kilimanjaro. Literally means slowly, slowly. And that's because we need to keep our heart rate down in order for us not to be overexerting ourselves. And that's something you get on the first days. Like people are super strong, they're ready to go, they're ready to kill it. And they reach the first camp in no time. And then when we come to summit night, it's like, where's all that energy? It's because we've already consumed it on earlier days. So slowly, slowly conserving energy, super important. And then of course, resting. Nothing beats rest. The more we can rest and the more we can sleep, the more our body is able to recover, the better we're going to feel on the subsequent days. Medication at high altitude, particularly Diamox, doesn't produce calories, does not hydrate, actually dehydrates, which is a very important point to keep in mind. And of course, it doesn't help us with sleep or rest. It does have its uses, don't get me wrong. And when symptoms start to show, if sometimes you feel like some certain symptoms like bad headaches or so on and so forth, it may be one of the tools in our arsenal to combat it. But it should not be used for preventative purposes, specifically because on the list of reasons why people turn around on Kilimanjaro, the number one reason is dehydration. People are dehydrated. They're losing their nutrients through sweat. They're losing their nutrients through exertion. And now we're introducing a diuretic, which is another way for us to lose our nutrients. And that's why we turn around. And the symptoms, dealing with acute symptoms of high altitude, is like problem number 4 or 5, maybe even lower down on that list. Right, and that's where the Diamox becomes an effective tool. But it's a balance of issues, like with all things in when we're introducing medicines, it's a balance of issues. If you have one problem and you deal with it with a medicine that will exacerbate another bigger problem that you already have, then you're probably going to want to stay away from that. And that's the issue with Diamox and with apoacetazolamide. You're in this situation where it's like, yes, altitude is an issue, but on Kilimanjaro specifically, altitude is not the number one issue, and it's not even in the top 5 issues that we may have to deal with. If you have a little bit of a headache, sometimes it's normal. A Panadol, a painkiller, would usually go way further than treating it with a diuretic. Diamox has its place, but it shouldn't be used regularly. So. That's my little explanation about high altitude. I'll go one step further and just also say that, at the end of the day, we want to go up and we want to experience the mountain. We want to feel what it's like to be on Kilimanjaro, and we also don't want to hurt ourselves in the process. So we have an ethos at Life Happens Outdoors, which is that if you aren't capable today, the mountain is not going anywhere. If it's just bad luck, if your physiology just doesn't want to work, if it's just not the time to go up to the top, it's just not the time to go up to the top. What we don't want to do is push you, have you be a dehydrated raisin on the summit, on the brink of severe problems, probably having severe internal problems without realizing, and then send you back down having summited, but with permanent problems for the rest of your life. That's not what we're about. What we want is for you to get up there on your own 2 feet, be proud of your achievement, and come down and come back for more, and not think that this was like hell on earth and you don't know how you did this. That's not the point. We don't want that. And it's very often that we unfortunately see many other climbers and many other groups kind of, now the latest thing is seeing these oxygen, tubes and somebody walking behind with an oxygen tank. It's like, guys, we're not even at 6,000 meters. Oxygen is not necessary up here except as an emergency tool to go down. Because what happens if that oxygen runs out and you're using it to go up? Or what happens if the system fails? I mean, we're not in it's not that the environment is one in which these things are more likely than not, unfortunately. So then what? You've now gotten your body used to lower altitude because you're artificially pumping it with oxygen, and suddenly you shock it at a much higher altitude than you should be, instead of just going down, letting your body recover at lower altitude, and then maybe giving it a second shot, or maybe, allowing your body to live and be healthy to come back another day. So yeah, there you have it. Your team leader and guide will have a full medical first aid kit that includes everything that you need for all the eventualities that could occur on the mountain. So we have of course emergency oxygen. We have a number of medications that can deal with various symptoms of high altitude. Diamox is one of them, but there are many others as well. We have what you need for problems with digestion at high altitude, problems with dealing with the new kind of food, all the typical things that can occur on an adventure trip. We have the medical kit in order to be able to deal with it. What we recommend to our joiners is for them to look at, if there's a particular painkiller that works for you with, when you have a headache, or a particular kind of medication that works for an upset stomach that you're generally used to, bring that with you, because that's something that that you would likely use. And because we're not going to have every brand of painkiller. You know, maybe you need an ibuprofen, and we've got paracetamol or whatever. There might be something different that we have that you might need. So bring what you would normally use for things like upset stomach, the flu, painkillers. That's what I would say. What I would tell you to avoid is bringing, you know, a medical kit, like a full medical kit that, like, really, if we were going to be using this material, we would be in a surgery room. You know, we're not going to be going anywhere near, you know, incision tools. So don't bring anything like that. You know, just have some like blister pads. Those are really important. You know, your sunscreen, something for like a sunburn, but that's about it. Don't go too crazy. Don't go wild. Don't think that, you know, this is going to be some kind of you know, cliffhanging adventure. It's not like that. Kind of the worst case scenario was maybe a little cut or scrape because you were talking to somebody and not looking, and you tripped over a little rock and, you know, just fell on the trail, and that's about it. Normally, that's what we have to deal with. A little headache from being at altitude or exerting ourselves too much. That's also quite typical. And, you know, stomach issues. Those are kind of the main things that we deal with. So if you have medicines that work for you in those scenarios, I'd say bring those, and just avoid like all the, you know, the upselling that happens at these stores sometimes. So the Machami route has been the route that Life Happens Outdoors has been offering since the very beginning. Morango route came in a little bit later and has been quite popular as well. The routes are very different, and the experience on the mountain is completely different. The Machami route starts on the southwest side of the mountain. It goes along the base of the crater on the south side, and then ultimately we summit from the east side of the mountain. So we spend a lot of time very close to the Kibu crater, which is the main crater of Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is, of course, made up of 3 craters, Kibu, Shira, and Mwenzi. Kibu is the highest. And we'll have the opportunity to really see it from almost every angle and every side. And all the glaciers that are still quite relatively healthy on Kilimanjaro are on the south side of the mountain. So you really do see the glaciers hanging above you, and that's really something quite spectacular. And it's a tented route, so we spend all of our nights in tents, and every day we're moving from one camp to the other as we make our way along the trail and then ultimately summit from the top. The trail itself has a really good acclimatization schedule, so we climb normally to a slightly higher altitude than where we sleep every day. So we go up and then we go down a little bit, and this allows our body to kickstart the acclimatization process for a slightly higher altitude and then to sleep in a lower altitude. The Morango route is on the opposite side of the mountain, so it's on the east side of the mountain, and once we come to the actual summit night, we reach the crater from the northeast side before connecting with the Machami route at Stella Point, which is 45 minutes from the summit. That's where all the classic routes converge, and then we go up to the summit of Kilimanjaro from there. It's a hut route, so we're sleeping in physical huts that are built by the park. And each hut has around 4 beds in it on average, but sometimes it's a little bit more, it's a little bit less depending on where we are. The huts, we don't have a mess tent on the Morango route, so we'll be using a common mess hall that all the other expeditions also use. We're sitting on our own table, of course, but you'll have other people with us as well. And the route itself is one in which we spend acclimatization nights on the trail itself, so in the huts itself. So it's not the same as the Machami route in the sense that we don't move every single day. So for instance, in Horombo, we spend a grand total of 3 nights, not all on the way up. We spend 2 on the way up and 1 on the way down. But we spend because of acclimatization, because the trail itself, going from one place to another, there are actually only 3 stops along the trail, whereas on the Machami route there are 6 stops on the trail, so it's a completely different thing. So we're moving from place to place every day. On the Morango route, we have full rest days where we're just staying in our place, not doing anything, maybe having a little acclimatization hike and coming back, and that's it. Also on the Marengo route, it's the same way up and the same way up, same way down. So as you're going up, we're going to do we're going to retrace our steps all the way back down. On the Machami route, we don't do that. We only retrace our steps for the summit push, which is what we would have done that morning when we go to the summit. Once we get back to the summit base camp, which is Barafu, it's a completely different route down. We're going to be almost parallel to the Marengo route somehow. There's about 8 or 9 kilometers spread between the two trails at this point. So we'll also be going down on the east side of the mountain. So that's pretty much it. In terms of views on the Marengo route side, whereas on the Machami side, you get the big glaciers on the south side of Kibu. On the Marengo route side, you get to walk by the Mwenzi, which is the second volcano, which is a really, really gigantic crater and very jagged. It's actually a technical climb. We're not going to climb it, but we'll walk past it. And then we cross the saddle. The saddle is the space between Kibu, which is the bigger crater, and Mwenzi, which is the smaller crater. And that section is the classic view of Kilimanjaro. If you ever see pictures of Kilimanjaro, you see this kind of big crater with the snow cap at the top. That's the view that you get from the saddle, which you only access on the Marengo route side. So there are pros and cons to both. I would say that both are, at the end of the day, you're getting to the same point, which is the summit of Kilimanjaro. And it really comes down to what you're looking for in an experience. Marengo route is, I would say, generally I wouldn't call it easier, because it isn't easier at all. For every day other than summit night, I would say that it's probably a little bit easier. Summit night, though, is more challenging on the Marengo route side because it's longer. We have to reach Gilman's Point first, and we spend more time at high altitude. Whereas on the Machami route side, summit night is shorter, and so it's easier to do in terms of length of time spent at high altitude. But again, it levels out in the sense that on the Marengo route side, you have movement on every day. On the Machami side, you have movement every day. On the Marengo route side, you have these rest days that make it slightly easier on the daily basis side of that trail. Kilimanjaro is a life-changing experience. There is nobody who's ever been to Kilimanjaro with us who hasn't literally come back different. The mountain is amazing, the energy is amazing, the vibes are amazing. Our team over there are spectacular. The food is really, really, really nice. It's really good. Fresh avocados, fresh fruits right from there. The coffee is amazing. We brew our own coffee on this trip from the coffee plantations at the base of the mountain. It really is an adventure journey that for most of us will be a start of something completely new. It'll open up a completely new spectrum of what we ourselves are capable of and what the world has to offer. So if you are thinking about Kilimanjaro, Marengo, Machami, whatever, this one is a no-brainer. It is a challenge. You will go through some difficult trials, difficult tribulations, but there will be an internal monologue between you and yourself, and you will go to some difficult places, that's for sure. But we're with you every step of the way. We understand what you're going through. We've been there more often than you can imagine, and we see the value in these experiences so truly that we take it upon ourselves to go back to Kilimanjaro again and again and again with new people experiencing this for the first time, because we know what value this experience will bring to your life on and off the trail. So don't overthink it. If Kilimanjaro is on your bucket list, let's tick this one off together.